To the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we go on another afternoon of tailgating. Tall Tales is the name of the show. I am your cordial, amiable, ever modest host, Robert Klitzkie. And I'd like to start out with Zemi Ikutny, but we're fresh out. The Daily News did not run an editorial today. The Post hasn't one run for about 4 months. So I'm going to pick up something from Mark Levin, one of the last standing talk show hosts on TV and on the radio. On the radio. Not on TV, but on the radio. And this ran on Newsmax, which may very well be running Fox News, some real competition. So here's how it goes. Plans by automakers, Ford and others, to eliminate AM radios from new cars are, quote, an attack on conservative talk shows. Conservative talk radio host Mark Levin said on his radio show Friday, "Let's talk about radios for a minute. Ford is the latest manufacturer that says future production of cars will not include the AM platform." They can't do that.
It's bad enough they took out the 8-track.
BMW has said it. Others have said it because it interferes with something or other. They finally figured out how to attack conservative talk radio. Mediality reported Levin saying during his show, "Let me be the first one to say it right at the manufacturer level, rather than going after us through the FCC, rather than going after us through legislation, rather than going after us through boycotting advertisers and all the rest. Just don't make AM stations available in automobiles anymore, because not all, but most conservative talk shows are on the AM band." Levin said removing AM band and new radios would prohibit drivers from tuning into shows like his to get information. This idea that all of a sudden you're going to remove the AM band from cars, that's aimed at people like me to prevent people like you from just turning on your radio as you're driving your local area or general area and listen to the radio. You know, this is really bad news, Jose. You know, I rent cars when I'm in the mainland, and one of the things I really enjoy is I drive cross-country and tune in the radio. It's a lot of fun. And, you know, the last time I was in the Southwest, I had a radio that was so strong that if you span the whole dial, you know, say at 5 in the afternoon, you could actually find a station that broadcast in English. Yeah.
Yeah, to think about that.
Yeah, there are a few.
But AM's the way, especially when you're going cross country. I know a lot of people are saying, well, there's satellite radio. You know, you have to subscribe to that.
Yeah.
AM radio, you have no subscription. I was on a canoe, believe it or not, purposely, intentionally, between here and Rhoda, and the only thing that we can pick up, the only station we could pick up were the AM stations here on Guam in the middle of the Rhoda Banks. It was incredible.
Yeah, AM has much longer range than AM. I mean, than FM, especially at night. You know, there used to be really powerful stations on the Mexican border on the other side. Like there was one in, I think it was Piedras Negras, 250,000 watts, because they weren't regulated, obviously, by the FCC. But I can remember picking up a station from Juarez when I was going to college in Wisconsin at night. Yeah, FM's good. The fidelity's greater, but I don't care about fidelity. I want content. So I see this as just another way that they're kind of chipping away at us on this stuff, right? And of course, every day I find that there are more and more things that I've known about I've had all my life that are being taken away or disappearing or aged out or replaced or something like that. And this, I suppose, this adds to it. You know, to be able to drive down the road in a new car with a standard transmission and a good AM radio station, that to me was the best it could get. You can't rent a car with stick transmission anymore. Now AM radio is going, and I've tried Sirius XM, and it's good. And you know, if you buy a car or if you rent a car that's less than a year old, the Sirius XM comes with the car, and you don't actually have to pay for it. Yeah, and that's the only time I'm too cheap otherwise to do it. Okay, so here's what Mark Levin says. This is a quote. "Oh, no, Mark, you can't prove that." Mark says, "I don't have to prove nothing. I've been around long enough. I figured things out. We're way ahead of the curve here. That's exactly what they've done. That's exactly what they're doing." Levin's show airs on Westwood One Network, which is owned by Cumulus Media and consists of 404 stations in 85 markets. Back in 2008, Jose, when I was working in Cleveland on John McCain's campaign, we shut down the headquarters at 2100. I'd climb in my car, turn on the radio, and that's when Mark Levin came on. So I'd listen to him for the 15 minutes it took me to get back to my motel. He reaches 250 million people nationwide. The company announced in February that it was launching an official podcast channel for Levin on YouTube. The Mark Levin YouTube channel provides fans with a new platform to access each day's podcast with new insights and unique commentary on the day's top news events, etc. In the release, Levin said he was excited about the channel's launch. "I'm very excited about being on YouTube," he said. But anyhow, the gravamen of this story here is that Mark sees a conspiracy amongst auto manufacturers. We don't need no conservative talk shows in our car. Let's not put AM radio in there anymore. Okay, well, you know, so many things that I used to really like the manual choke. No more, you can't get a car with a manual choke.
I was on the cusp of that, and I never learned to use it.
Uh-huh.
Lawnmowers, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was this lady in my hometown. Now, this is kind of an apocryphal story, but when she got in, she'd always pull the manual choke out and use it to hang her purse on it. And she wondered why her car never ran very well.
But her purse stayed clean.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a peek at the card. So we're going to start out, of course, with systemic racism. Nothing in the Public Law 36-34 calendar. I've got Doug versus the governor's lawyers. I've got the Manakilo versus the Manak Papa from Candid. Enriquez versus Okada versus Quisenberry. AG versus Jansen. GV Board versus the Carl, etc. So let's just take a peek at systemic racism here. I think everybody understands the drill pretty well now. It's not about rice. It's not about a choti. It's about the narrative and the truth. The truth is that the rice is orange, but the narrative says it's red. And if you don't go along with that, you're going to get canceled. Okay, and then we go from there to Doug versus the governor's lawyers. And I thought I was done gloating, but I guess not. Because when this all came up, when the lease first surfaced and the admiral said, here is my idea of a lease. We will let you lease the Eaglesfield area at what we think is a very favorable lease. We have some conditions. You'll have 30 days to enter into this lease. And if you don't, we've got other uses that we're going to put it to. And I don't want to make, he had some kind of throwaway line like, I don't want this to go on forever or something like that. So nobody got a chance to see the whole lease. When it was finally sent to the governor, she had to send it to the attorney general because the attorney general has to approve all Guam leases for approval as to form and substance. It has to be in the right format, and it has to be in accordance with the laws of Guam. So it didn't take Doug long to send a note to the governor saying, your lease stinks, Governor. You got so many problems here, I can't approve it. And he also said, I didn't get to see this lease until you sent it. I was never in the negotiation process. And that caused me to draw a couple of conclusions. One conclusion was that the 30-day absolutely firm deadline was actually a 30-day lease set up in firm jello that could easily be dissolved or chewed up or cut up if necessary. And when we got down to that point, I was proven right. And as the thing unfolded, I said, I wonder if the governor even has her legal beagles working on this. Or is this just Carlota Leon Guerrero and Vera Topaznia negotiating with the Navy's lawyers? Because the mistakes in this lease should have never gotten by our lawyers. But they did. So the governor then sends over a new lease. And that made Candid News as breaking news. Navy sends Adelup new lease. Tutlahi warns of corruption. And here's how that story goes. The governor's office moments ago issued a release stating the U.S. Navy has revised, gloat, 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 the Eaglesfield lease to ameliorate all of Attorney General Moylan's concerns. The proposal would, if signed by Admiral Benjamin Nicholson, Governor Leon Guerrero, and Mr. Moylan, lease more than 100 acres of naval land at Fidian to Gov Guam for the construction of an estimated $1 billion medical complex. Speaker Therese Tetlahi was told by the governor in writing that there were no new developments to explain to senators at a recent hearing. No new development. Nothing to see here. Nothing happening. Said Adelup's political acrobats, to avoid legislative and public scrutiny, stain this deal with the stench of corruption. It really was something, you know, when the second iteration of the lease is about to arrive, and the governor sends a note saying there's nothing no new developments here. So he goes on to say, it's shocking to me that the governor would go to extreme lengths in attempts to avoid legislative review of this lease and avoid full disclosure of the obligations. Now listen to this. The obligations being imposed on the people of Guam. Now, I'm going to have some very harsh words for Speaker Terlahi before we're done here. And starting out right here, who is imposing these obligations on the people of Guam? If it's anybody, it's the governor. This insistence on above-review deal-making leaves us more vulnerable to bad deals and corruptions, and will only grow the distrust in our government at a time when our people deserve openness and transparency for everything that we do except the agenda for sessions. And then there's potential openness and transparency, but it's only potential because somebody's got to make a motion for openness and transparency. Like I said, I look forward to the AG's review. Mr. Moylan returned unsigned the original draft lease sent to him for legal approval, effectively informing the governor the lease is illegal for a number of reasons. One of the news stories said that Doug Moylan said it's dead on arrival. Among those reasons were the lease's commitment of funds without legislative appropriation. The news release from the governor's office discusses those issues and the solutions they believe the Navy and the governor's office have arrived at. The proposed lease also was disclosed and is included as a link at the bottom of the story here. So I have that lease in my iPad. And then there's a release from the governor. I'll pick up parts of it. This afternoon, Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio reviewed the lease with counsel, and he believes these revisions have resolved Attorney General Moylan's legal concerns. So apparently the Navy guys went through this exercise by themselves. I'll read that sentence again. This afternoon, Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio reviewed the lease with legal counsel. That's her legal counsel. And he believes the lease revisions have resolved Attorney General Moylan's legal concerns. As such, the late governor sent the revised lease to the Office of the Attorney General for review. Now, that's interesting. So apparently, I was on to something. Apparently, the governor's lawyers are not a part of this process because they weren't part of this second look, apparently.
They're still on the 19th floor.
Yeah. All right. So then the next thing I have here is today, Speaker Titlahi sent out a copy of the governor's lawyer to her, which was dated yesterday. And dear Governor, we received a second draft regarding the above proposed lease, etc. To assist our legal review, please provide us the following. And then there's a list of 6 different categories of documents that the Attorney General wants to see in order for him to review the lease. He hasn't reviewed it. He's taken a peek at it, and this is what he says he needs: information on the exact funding source for the $9+ million identified in paragraph 4, and a letter from the grant administrator that states that the governor of Guam, without legislative involvement, has complete authority to apply that grant funding for the lease. In other words, one thing she's saying is, I don't need no stinking appropriation. I'm going to use this money I got from the feds. And we know that Wong versus Kamina, a district court case, says that the legislature not only doesn't need to appropriate that money, it can't appropriate that money.
Okay, this is the big question I had about that part of the lease, and I don't know if you're going to get to it. A.G. Moylan said that the lease had to be reviewed, right, by the legislature in order for him to sign off on it?
Not reviewed. He said that there had to be certain things, certain role that the legislature had. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm thinking in my mind, you can put all your own money into the lease. It still needs to be reviewed whether it's not even her money.
No.
Okay.
So that's what she said. I'm going to use $9,136,000
ARP
from federal funds. And Doug says, identify the federal funds and give us a letter from the grant administrator that you don't need no stinking legislature to obligate that money. And then number 2, information on the source of funding for the hospital and medical campus, especially as funding relates to the monthly or incremental payments required to pay down the loan amount. 2, the source of loan securities. 3, damages provisions for the promissory note, etc., and so on. And then if the amount is being sourced by federal funds, identify the funding source and give us a letter from the grant administrator. You can't blame Doug for doing this stuff. I mean, that's exactly what we've hired him to do. I want to see your receipts.
And here's very simplistic. The ARP or whatever these federal funds were meant to help the people they were sent to, not to promote an agenda of the governor. The legislature appropriates money because that's their job and duty. The governor can appropriate these funds because that's part of the law, but neither of them owns these funds.
That's true. Okay, third item on the list. Please confirm exact funding source for administrative fees of $1.5 million to restore property and remove structures. And likewise, if those amounts are from a federal grant, guess what, right? Number 4, please provide proof that RECO has waived the insurance requirement and allows self-insurance. And if not, the funding source for the insurance policy with the proof from the federal, 5, please clarify that under paragraphs 4, 5.1, and 10, access to the facility with keys, that the military will be using the medical facilities along with GovGuam taxpayers and not without needing to exercise the federal government's right to condemn the facility under paragraph 15.3, national emergency. Finally, paragraph 6, the attorney, this is cool. Tell us why the Attorney General of Guam's signature line was removed from page 26 of this second draft. And if you intend to sign the lease without the undersigned signature, why you would send this second draft for our review in such a short time frame? No! It's turned into a comedy of errors, hasn't it? Because our review is requested by April 29. There's another deadline there. 3 days, please provide a red line version comparing the lease I was provided on March 14 with the lease provided to me last night. We understand that the, quote, Navy, close quote, is setting this rush deadline in 3 days for April 29. We strongly suggest that deadline be removed and that we as people/government with government processes designed to protect the public's interest not be rushed, considering the importance and financial obligations of what is being negotiated. Thank you. I go back to the same thing I've been saying over and over again. You know, this is the Navy offering us something. Now, when someone is offering you something, ordinarily you don't get to determine the terms of the offering. One side makes an offer, the other one accepts or rejects. So don't give us any deadlines here. But obviously it's worked out the way the Admiral wanted it to, because I've never seen the government move this fast. Remember yesterday when I was talking about the take a number aspect of dealing with the Attorney General? There's no take a number here. This thing is moving right along. And, of course, if you're negotiating, you know how to use the concept of deadlock and the concept of deadline. So you're kvetching about the wrong thing here, Doug. You're doing fine down to that point. And it's not your job, you know, it's not your job to tell people how to negotiate. All right. So that went to the Attorney General for review. And then the next item that pops up today is in the Daily News, an article in the Daily News, forced review of Eaglesfield deal may have enough votes. And this looks to me like a case of the governor hoist with her own petard. Lawmakers may have enough votes to force a review of the administration's deal with the Navy for over 100 acres of land at Eagles Field in Magilo. Democrat Senators Santa Claus and Won't Parkinson, who were and they're from the Adelup Six, who were previously opposed to the move, said Thursday morning session that they had a change of heart. Said Nicholas and Parkinson's support will be enough to overcome the governor's veto of increased legislative oversight of the hospital land deal, provided previous support holds. Bill 12 would require lawmakers to sign off on the controversial hospital land deal, but received just 9 of the 10 votes needed to overcome a veto from Governor Leon Guerrero. San Nicolas and Parkinson will be the votes to swing the issue should the bipartisan coalition of 9 other lawmakers who have regularly opposed Adelup since the start of the term hold up. A revised copy of the lease for the hospital is sitting on the desk of Attorney General Doug Moylan. Well, not anymore, because it was received at the legislature at 10:20 this morning. You got to wonder if that didn't play into what's going on here when they saw that letter from Doug Moylan. Back to the article. Moylan opined the legislature would have to approve any financial obligations made in the lease, along with many other issues that needed to be corrected. So apparently, then, when the Navy guys reviewed the lease, then the language was inserted that the money would come from federal funds. The Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration has instead proposed a $10.6 million worth of federal funds are beyond the authority of lawmakers to cover any obligations in the lease. Speaker Titlahi Thursday morning motioned for another override on Bill 12. Titlahi coming to tears as she spoke. Whoa. You got a box of Kleenex in there, Jose?
No, but we have some music.
Oh. Coming to tears as she spoke. Wow. Asked lawmakers not to acquiesce and to allow the deal being cut between Adelup and the Navy to proceed without a review. She said it would set a dangerous precedent where any governor could approve any lease with any terms with no oversight. The administration has extended invitations to the Speaker to discuss the land lease, but declined to attend a public hearing on the details of the lease called earlier this week. Now, that's what I mean by the governor may be hoist with her own petard. You know, it's one thing not to be open, it's one thing not to be transparent, but it's something else to embarrass the legislature by stiffing an invitation. It's kind of like when you ask a girl to go to the prom with you. Ask a girl, do you have a date for the prom? No, I don't. Would you go with me? No, I don't think so. And then she goes and finds your best friend and says, can you take me to the prom? Yeah, it probably really sat wrong with the senators. Let's take a short break and we'll come back and wrap this up, Jose.
Good day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Express yourself into the groove. The Guam Chamber of Commerce celebrates its 99th anniversary at the Dusatani Resort on May 6th with the theme of Madonna's Vogue. The Chamber's membership includes many corporations, large and small, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. Members play a key part in making Guam a star-bright place to live, work, and play. Let's congratulate the Guam Chamber of Commerce and its members on celebrating its 99th anniversary.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So back to this article here from the Daily News. Senator San Nicolas, also known as Santa Claus, stood up to speak in support of the bill, saying he had changed his mind. Not in support of the bill, but in support of the override. Yeah, a little different. Saying he had changed his mind after speaking at length with the members of the medical community about challenges faced by healthcare providers and after having witnessed the speaker's tears. Yeah. The senator said he still supported the hospital's construction, but believed that a balanced approach would be positive moving forward. Well, this balanced approach means it's not going to go forward. It's done. It's over. And I suspect that that's exactly what the admiral and his think tank figure. You know, we'll wait. We've been the good guys. We've got the admiral says, I've got a white hat. We went as far as we possibly could to work with the civilian authorities. You know, we even extended the deadline, et cetera. And then they come along, and Therese Terlahi, with her rusty monkey wrenches, because they got, salt water has a devastating effect on iron and steel, throws a monkey wrench into the works, and it'll take forever for this thing to go, if we sign off on it, to go through the legislature. So it's over. So that's Santa Claus's balanced approach. Parkinson said he still believed the increased bureaucracy would slow the building of a new hospital. But said, I pride myself on being a team player. We noticed what a team player he was when he started usurping the authority of the speaker even before he was sworn in. Parkinson agreed to go along with other lawmakers who said they supported a new hospital, but were concerned about oversight.
He's known to switch teams midstream.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so that's where it's at. And then we've got some breaking news here, again, from the one thing I like about the Daily News, if there's news, the Post is not going to run it until tomorrow morning. If it's the Daily News, they'll get it out in the middle of the day. So here's a story that ran in the Daily News just a few minutes ago. A near unanimous group of lawmakers voted Thursday morning to force a review of the administration's deal with the Navy for 100 acres of land at Eagle Field. Bill 12 would require lawmakers to sign off on the controversial hospital land deal, but received, you know all that, right? But in a drastic turn, every senator present this morning opted in favor of the override during a second vote. Everybody except for Tina Rose Munga Barnes.
Absent for another vote.
I guess we got to refer to her as Tina Rose Tigui Barnes from now on. She's been absent an awful lot.
Tina Munya part-time Barnes.
Uh-huh. Democrat Dwayne San Nicolas and William Parkinson, who were previously opposed to the move, were the first to state during Thursday's session that he had a change of heart San Nicolas and Parkinson support will be enough to overcome the governor's veto. Either San Nicolas or Parkinson would have been enough to swing the issue alongside the bipartisan coalition of 9 other lawmakers who have regularly opposed Adelup since the start of the term. But when roll was called for the final vote, every single senator present sounded an aye in favor of the override. Now, that's a miracle because Paris, Shelton, and Tello did not pass. That must mean that they had taken the time to understand what the override was about before the voting started. Amazing. Nicholson, as you were Nicholas, Parkinson, St. Augustine, Shelton, and Roy Kanata all swung in favor of increased oversight. A revised copy of the lease for the hospital land is sitting on the desk. Well, we know that's not true. If it's sitting on anybody's desk now, it's Speaker Terlahi. Moylan opined that the legislature would, I've already gone through that. Terlahi coming to tears as she spoke. They copied that from the earlier story. Okay, so that was the override. Now, there's just one more little information here that I got to share with you on this matter before I see who's waiting for me in the green room. This is from KOAM News. And the Navy has come up with a new lease agreement for the controversial Eagles Field lease. Perhaps the bigger news is the legislature today unanimously overrode the governor's veto on the bill that could essentially render the whole deal moot. The controversy has been brewing for months now. Eagle Field in Lalo, Malangilo, etc. Lawmakers, though, have raised various concerns over the deal and been most critical about being left out of planning and negotiations. Being left out is bad, but stiffing an invitation to come on over and chat. I think that must have been what turned the tide for the Adelup Six.
They now became Ghostbusters.
Yeah, so, yeah, there's one thing about doing things that you don't agree with, advancing policies that you don't like. These will tend to get you on the wrong side of people, but hurting somebody's feelings, no, that is heavy duty. Now, here we go. They want in a bill by Senator Therese Tetlahi, which was vetoed, would insert legislative approval over any long-term lease with the feds. Tetlahi set the tone for the override with an emotional plea to colleagues. And this is what I touched on earlier on here. And she deserves severe criticism for this. Quote, do not acquiesce in them saying they are done with returning federal lands. Now, who is them? Right? It's not the governor. Do not acquiesce to them saying they are done with returning lands. They are done with their promises to us while we carried a huge burden for them. Do not acquiesce. We are the legislature and we are here for one purpose, and that's checks and balance for every governor, for even governors that we love. It's bigger than us, whether we're going to obligate the people to billions of dollars, etc., without us, a legislature, having any say. And I pledge my reasonableness. If this deal is good, I'm all for it. But, there's a lot of things she could have said, but she didn't have to say, do not acquiesce in them saying they're, we can't get over this, can we? What about the original landowners?
This isn't even about that, Speaker.
It's not about that. And she is the one, of course, who keeps throwing it back, that log back on the fire.
Right.
Yeah.
This is all about the governor, even if you love her.
Yeah. So, the admiral says, I'm going to make you guys an offer, and this is my offer. This is what it is. And as part of my offer, I'm setting a deadline. Well, you can't do that to us. And then there's a little bit more going on down here. I may have to... where did that go? I may have to break out my stuff about the Dunning-Kruger syndrome again.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, you'll remember, who was it, R. Frank?
Fred.
R. Fred. R. Fred said, the one thing about the Dunning-Kruger Club? You can't know that you're in it. And Tello has once again earned a seat in the Dunning-Kruger Club. Here it goes. A previous override attempt had failed, but this time, one after another, senators joined the chorus of support with emotions running raw. That's what we elect you guys for. We don't want you to make decisions with your head. We don't want the brain housing group in your decision-making process. Please instead use alimentary reasoning. I didn't say elementary. We're not back to Sherlock Holmes. Alimentary, as in alimentary canal. Your mouth is one end of the alimentary canal. Your rectum is the other end of the alimentary canal. Alimentary reasoning means this. If something warms your tummy, it's good. If something tightens up your anal sphincter, it's bad. And that's where emotions reside. They reside in the alimentary canal, not in your brain housing group. So if you're making emotional pleas, count me out. I'm not in. I hear this, so-and-so is a great senator. He is or she is so passionate. I don't want passion. I want reason. Yeah, so here's Tello's reapplication for the Dunning-Kruger Club. Don't make our people of Guam feel like they're second-class citizens. No! That they don't deserve to do this the right way just because someone's sitting up there in the perch saying, do it my way or the highway. Republican Tello Taitigui said, I don't care. I'm going to do it my way. Did you hear that? I did it pretty good, didn't I? That's because I constantly hear that all the time. Now, is she talking about the admiral or the governor?
I hope she's talking about the governor.
I hope so, but I doubt it.
Because it makes no sense to talk about the admiral.
It makes no sense at all, and that's why the DK dimension might come back here.
And I told you before the show began, my biggest gripe with this session, I'm glad the veto was overridden, was this constant criticism of the military and the admiral. We didn't vote them in, and they're not accountable to us. Only one person that was a part of that lease.
Yep. Absolutely. So we had somebody in the agreement.
That was Ken LG.
Oh.
So hopefully he calls back. You want to?
Yeah, please call back, and we want to hear from you. We're going to take a short break. Call in during the break, and we'll give you the last 10 minutes of the first half, Ken.
Say goodbye to high power bills with Budweiser. Purchase 12 packs of Bud Family and Bud Light Seltzer and scan the QR bucks inside for your chance to win a home solar package with install from Generation Renewable, a Choice Quad Play bundle from GTA, and other solar gear. Plus, all the codes you scan can earn you points that you can redeem for great Budweiser gear. Just check the current Guam app to schedule your prize pickup. Must be 21 to enter. See currentguam.com for details. Budweiser reminds you to enjoy responsibly.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
Okay, so here we are. I just ran I just brought you up to date on where we are with the lease. With the lease, the governor, the attorney general, the admiral, and the crying lady, Weepy Therese Delahaye, the Speaker of the Legislature. And, you know, next time I see Therese, I've got a reminder of a league of their own. Therese, there's no crying at the legislature. All right, Ken, what do you want to cry about today? I mean, what do you want to tell me about today?
Well, I'm hoping that the new Alliance for the People stands up and they bring Bill 13 up for an override tomorrow, because between the two bills, that was a more important bill. A bill requiring the government to follow the law, which I find ironic every time I think about it, you know, that we have to pass a law to get Adelup to follow the law. But as someone who has been in and out of court with this administration and with Guam Memorial and GITA, I kind of understand why we have to go to that extreme. Because, you know, there are a lot of things happening with public assets. We're talking about land, money, and other things that are happening below the table, you know. And it's only when we reaffirm that this administration and this government has to follow the law, then we as citizens have a better chance of managing the people we hired with our votes to represent us and make decisions and spend money in our name. But right now we don't have that, because we have an administration that feels they can do whatever they want to do. And up until, I'd say, what was it, 11 o'clock this morning, we had a legislature that was letting them get away with it. We'll see what they do on Bill 7, which is another attempt at reducing the dictatorship-like powers that the governor has assumed. And Bill 13 will reassert the public's right to know. So these are two critical votes. I hope both of them come up tomorrow. And I hope the same coalition, and I think the reason why we saw the Adelup 6 got reduced down to the Adelup 1 is I think that they've been feeling the heat from citizens, because I've had a lot of people call up and tell me, yeah, I called so-and-so's office. Yeah, I called so-and-so's office. So that encourages me that there are other people out there as well raising their concerns on these issues. And maybe, just maybe, the governor will say, well, I guess since I've got this $10 million sitting around, I might as well go ahead and use it for the labor and delivery room at Guam Memorial Hospital, because during her watch, about 10 to 12,000 children have been born. And if you remember on the campaign trail at the Guam Medical Association debate, she swore to the people of Guam that would be one of the first projects that would be addressed in her administration. And here we are almost 5 years later, and my granddaughter was born there, and I can tell you that the facilities are no better now than they were when I first started testifying in 2010. In fact, they're substantially worse than they were in 2010. So I'm encouraged that so many people are speaking up. I hope they keep speaking up and support Chris Duenas' Bill 7 and Bill 13 as well, so that we can finally take a significant chunk out of the dictatorial powers that we're facing.
Well, I'm going to make a prediction here, Ken, that the governor's failure to respond to the legislature's invitation may have been her Waterloo, that this may have broken.
Yeah, you're right on time with the drums there. Excellent. Excellent point.
Yeah, because it may have broken up the Adelup 6.
You just call her short.
When I redraw the caricatures, I may have to tarnish the crown a little bit.
Good enough, Ken. Now, is there any truth that Bill 13 has one section called the Ken Leon Guerrero amnesty provision?
Unfortunately, no, and I wish it would, because it is now the way I know. I've tried several times to get my police report, and the records head there says the only way they're going to give me a copy of my report, even though it's been broadcast all over the internet, is I have to hire an attorney, $5,000 retainer, and have him get a copy of it and get it to me. Or I have to file a motion with Superior Court of Guam, $300 out of my pocket, to be appointed a pro se litigant. And then I can take the order to the Records Department by the Superior Court of Guam, forcing them to release my arrest record, this blows my mind because I was a police officer back many years ago. And whenever we arrested anybody, we routinely gave them a card, put it with their things that had the case number, and told them 5 to 7 working days, depending on when you were arrested, you can go over to Records Division and get a copy of your arrest report. So I'm trying to get an appointment with Doug to find out where my case stands. I haven't had anybody return my calls yet. But I'm just a couple of months away from appearing before the judge up in Northern Court.
Which or are you dealing with at the police department?
Pardon me?
Who are you dealing with at the police department?
I can't remember her name, but she was at the Records Division there at ITC building, and she was starting to imply that if I didn't leave, she would have me removed from the building, and that would make me a habitual offender, and I didn't want to have that on my record when I go before the Northern Court, demanding public documents twice in a row, God forbid that the citizen actually asks to see what's going on in rooms paid for by taxpayers, staffed by people being paid for by taxpayers, consultants brought in at taxpayer expense, and producing materials that the taxpayers are paying for a project that the taxpayers are paying for.
Got it, Ken.
So,
one thing, Ken, have you thought about going to the chief of police and demanding that paper?
I think I will do that because I've tried that before in other cases, and Steve Ignacio basically did the same song and dance,
Well, give it a shot.
I'll do it on camera.
Yeah, very good.
The same thing on camera that they say in private.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ken. So here we are, the big halftime on Tall Tales. Big halftime show, Rogues Gallery. Doesn't get any better than that.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Raising the debt ceiling. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. 4 months after the federal government reached its debt limit, House Republicans have passed a bill to raise it, while at the same time cutting trillions in federal spending. House Speaker McCarthy says President Biden can no longer refuse to talk spending cuts.
The majority of Americans overwhelmingly want us to sit down and negotiate, to make sure we end our dependency on China, to stop the inflations the Democrats created by spending $6 trillion.
The White House says the president still insists on a debt ceiling increase without spending cuts and would veto any bill containing them. Following talks at the White House, there's a new nuclear agreement between the U.S. and South Korea.
U.S. nuclear weapons will not be housed in South Korea, but President Biden and South Korean President Yoon agreed on docking some nuclear-armed submarines off South Korea's coast from time to time, as well as enhancing training and intelligence sharing.
And it's about strengthening deterrence in response to the DPRK's escalatory behavior.
President Biden says a nuclear attack by North Korea against the U.S. or an ally is unacceptable.
And will result in the end of whatever regime were to take such an action.
The Washington Declaration, as the agreement is called, is intended to bolster South Korean defenses without the country restarting its own nuclear program.
Fox's Jared Halpern at the White House. The Justice Department will tell a federal court in Boston today Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira might still have access to classified documents and so must remain in federal custody. Two of Teixeira's superior officers in the 102nd Intelligence Support Squadron, where Teixeira worked, have now been suspended. China's President Xi Jinping says he'll send an envoy to Kyiv to discuss a possible political settlement to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China has friendly relations with Moscow and is the biggest buyer of Russian oil and gas, economic leverage as well. America is listening to Fox News.
Say goodbye to high-power bills with Budweiser. Purchase 12 packs of Bud Family and Bud Light Seltzer and scan the QR bucks inside for your chance to win a home solar package with install from Generation Renewable, a choice quad play bundle from GTA, and other solar gear. Plus, all the codes you scan can earn you points that you can redeem for great Budweiser gear. Just check the current Guam app to schedule your prize pickup. Must be 21 to enter. See currentguam.com for details. Budweiser reminds you to enjoy responsibly.
Join us at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and see why they've been crowned Guam's best Chamorro food restaurant for 9 consecutive years. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet burgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña location from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for lunch, 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. for dinner, or 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. for their famous Sunday brunch.
A judge has blocked a ban on gender-affirming care in Missouri.
The limits on gender-affirming care were set to take effect Thursday. St. Louis County Circuit Judge Ellen Ribato has paused that until Monday at the earliest. The rule, backed by Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, was intended to shield from what he calls experimental treatments and only allows serious cases of gender dysphoria, conflict between birth gender and what one identifies as, to have a year and a half of therapy before meds can be dispensed. The ACLU argued that serious harm would be suffered if care is denied and asked for a month's delay. Judge Ribato said she will decide whether to grant that on Monday. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
The Justice Department has sued the state of Tennessee to block that state's restrictions on transgender health care for minors. The DOJ argues the new law violates the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. Smoking cigarettes continues to decline in the U.S., reaching another all-time low last year. A government survey finds 1 in 9 adults say they're still lighting up despite smoking bans and higher prices. In the mid-60s, more than 40% of the population smoked. The use of e-cigarettes is on the rise, with 1 in 17 adults saying they vape. A 7th grader in Michigan credited with saving a school bus full of students when their driver passed out.
The Warren Consolidated School District says the youngster, only identified as Dylan, noticed the bus driver in distress, jumped up, climbed behind the wheel, and managed to bring the bus to a safe stop. EMS taking the driver to the hospital, the driver's name and condition not released. But the school district posted a tribute to Dylan, prompting parents of other children on the bus to add comments calling him a hero. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Express yourself into the groove. The Guam Chamber of Commerce celebrates its 99th anniversary at the Dusatani Resort on May 6th with the theme of Madonna's Vogue. The Chamber's membership includes many corporations, large and small, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. Members play a key part in making Guam a star-bright place to live, work, and play. Let's congratulate the Guam Chamber of Commerce and its members on celebrating its 99th anniversary.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
So there we go, Jose. Tell them again.
Absolutely. You too can stand tall in your I'm a Tall Tailgater t-shirt featured in the Rogues Gallery by pointing your browser to thepoint.gu, the official website of this radio station. There you'll find a picture of the t-shirt sporting a beard. Click on that link and it'll bring you to the website where you can order your shirt. When it arrives, put it on and take a selfie and send that selfie to the Point's WhatsApp number at 671-797-8255. And you too can be a part of the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery.
It's that easy.
It's even easier if they're watching online because both streams have links in the comment.
Here you go. Okay, so we spent a little time here on what I've labeled the governor's Waterloo. You know, that she lost a really big battle here on the override of Bill 12. And even five of her loyal henchmen deserted and joined the other side. And one has to, in evaluating that, has to see it as anger that the governor herself developed by her not playing ball with the legislature. Now, you know, you could do, when you're the governor, you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. And you don't have to like senators, you don't have to like the legislature, but you have to recognize that there are certain things that you can't do without them. And in order to get them to do what you want, sometimes you got to be nice to them, even if you don't like them. Life is kind of like that, isn't it? So my sense is that when she refused to come to the legislature or let the lieutenant governor come or send even a tentago over there in the face of their invitation, that was it. Now, I've seen some comments on Facebook here about Parkinson, Won't Parkinson, the rechristening of Won't Parkinson to not Won't Parkinson, but Flip-Flop Parkinson. And I'd say don't be too hard on him and Santa Claus, because, you know, sometimes legislation is a moving target. And a senator may start out with a particular position, but as the facts and details unroll, you may think, I'm going to have to change my mind on this. So it's better to see that you made a mistake and change your mind and straighten it out than to be so prideful that you're going to say, I ain't changing my mind. Once I speak, that's it. That's a tough call. That's why sometimes being a senator is not easy.
What's going to be interesting to watch is the retaliation from Adelup. And we've seen it before. Mm-hmm. We've seen it done by her what do they call it? Her proxies online. Yeah. And you know, for me, I don't think she plays politics really well. Otherwise, she has some really horrible advisors. And it's not a health emergency anymore, so she has no sole authority anymore.
That's true. Yeah, so I think probably when she gets back, we can see more shots fired from the fourth branch of government. Remember, we have 4 branches now. There's the judicial branch, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and Carlo branch. Yeah, and Carlo branch is rumored to have a poison pen down there at Adelup, right? It's pretty good press releases if you like content, right? Yeah, so there's that. And then, of course, Clint Rizal showed us how easy it is to be a senator and go from there, to go from being a $55,000 senator to a $100,000 deputy chief of staff in one swell swoop, as it were. Yeah. So that's going to be really interesting to see what happens when the governor gets back. That's for sure. And then there's Bill 13, you know, and Ken makes a good point. That bill is flawed because it violates the separation of powers, but it's a good start. And then Chris's Bill 7 Bill 7, which limits the governor's ability to run a perpetual state of emergency. All good legislation. Perhaps all of them now, given that that the Antelope 6 has been broken up, might have a chance of passage. Okay, next item I've got on the card here, just for a minute, Joe Biden versus the government of Guam. And this goes back again to Joe Biden telling us through his secretary, through his Department of Interior, no more compact impact aid for you guys out there. We're going to see if we can get you some of the social programs that for your habitual residents that they don't get right now. And I see this as a disaster, and as I've explained it before, it's the compact impact is part of American foreign policy. It's not domestic policy. It's the United States dealing with foreign countries. And as a matter of constitutional law, foreign policy is strictly the creature of the national government. States have no role in foreign policy. Territories have no role in foreign policy. But we shouldn't have to pay for the national government's foreign policy initiatives, and that's what we're doing. The idea that people can come from the freely associated states to Guam without visas and stay as habitual residents is a real bargaining chip for the United States in its foreign policy initiatives with those three island nations. And that's fine, but we shouldn't have to pay for it. So my suggestion when this news broke was this is not a time, for letters and, going at it in the usual way. This is a time for bold and dramatic action. I want the governor to go to Washington. I want the governor to swear in a posse when she gets there. I want to see signs. I want to see demonstrations in front of the White House. I want to see the governor on every single talk show in Washington saying what I just got done saying, pointing out that the island of Guam is the forward edge of the battle area in America's defense, that we're out here defending all you guys back there, and you're sticking us with the cost of your foreign policy initiatives. It's wrong, and it's got to stop. That's what the governor should be saying. And she should have that posse of Chamorros and Guamanians that live in the capital area backing her up on that. She should correspond with the Secretary of State and say, put something in the compacts with those three countries that guarantee us the compact impact money so we don't have to pay for your foreign policy initiatives. And then here's something else that the governor needs to do. She needs to establish a border protection task force to determine what the territorial government can do with respect to those coming here without visas who intend to be habitual residents. Now, we don't have the immigration authority, but we do have customs authority. And our customs officers examine everyone that comes in through the airport. And I don't know what this task force would come up with, but remember when we first started seeing people arriving on boats and wading ashore? And the initial reaction was, well, we don't have anything to do with it, with immigration. But then the smarter heads at the Attorney General's office said, yeah, but wait a minute, you can't just land on this island without filing some papers. And they went through that. So I would like to have a skilled counsel go through this whole habitual residence thing and see what options are available to us at the airport when these folks arrive without visas. And along those lines, I think a notification should be sent to the presidents of those three countries saying, I hope you can get this into the treaties because we want to continue welcoming citizens from your country. The implication being that we want to continue, but you got to help us. We can't just let this go. And that apparently is the tendency. We can depend on Doug Moylan, of course, writing several letters I wonder if Doug Moylan has ever written to Dear Abby. May she rest in peace. If not, it's probably
multiple times.
Yeah, it's probably the only person he hasn't written to. Okay, next I've got the Monoculo versus the Monac Papa. And I'm going to go to Candid for that. But before I do, I notice somebody wants to get in here in the conversation in the green room. Let's see, that would be Flora. Good afternoon, Flora.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, hi. She's putting me right on.
I'd put you right on. I recognize your name, Flora, and I put you right on.
Oh, I was listening to you, and I was sort of like cracking up because you had mentioned about Therese Talahi crying. And, let me tell you something here, Bob. Whether she cried or not, I owe her all my love and support. She did, if you think about it, she did her utmost. From the first trial of that override, then a public hearing where this governor didn't show up, and then this one today, she made a point, and this to me itself is a win for me. I just want to let you know that I sort of like laughed. I don't know why I had to laugh, but of course you made a point. But in my opinion,
okay,
I love her as I love her. You know what I'm saying?
I got you.
I'm just curious about Barnes, why she wasn't there. I know she didn't show up for the past, whatever has been happening about the situation, but I'm thinking, is she medically sick, or does she have an intention to run for speaker again? No one knows. I wish someone, or even her herself, could explain why she was absent. That's why it cracked me up when you said, Tiger, nice Barnes.
Okay, Flora.
Barnes,
Yeah.
But wait, one more thing, Bob. I have this weird opinion of the loss of the compact. In fact, I don't know if you feel I might be wrong, but I remember I recalled reading. I don't know where I did read it, but I did read it somehow that that $360 million that the governor has kept in her bank. I believe there's a provision in the United States law that had happened, because of this COVID, that if it's not being used, the money has to be returned back to the U.S. coffers. And that's possibly why, maybe why Biden is zeroing out helping us with the compact, because they're seeing that money is not being used. So he I don't know. I'm just letting you know how I feel, that maybe that's why they don't want to give us compact, because they want her to use that money that's been sitting there,
Yeah.
I might be wrong. I don't know.
Good point,
But
Flora.
that's just my opinion. You enjoy your day today, sir.
Well, your opinion's always welcome on Tall Tales, Flora. Thanks for calling.
Otherwise, thank you so much.
Okay, where was I here? Flora called it. Good timing, Flora, right in between items on the card. Next on the card is Monoculo versus Monac Papa. And Candid ran a story on this, and another media did too. And the contrast here, governor's 22% pay raise can't be put in place because she didn't send a plan to the governor. That's a condition preceding to paying those raises. So, the low-level government of Guam employee, that'd be the Monac Papa. Now, the Monoculo, that would be the folks up at the top of the government, your directors and your cabinet members, et cetera. And there's been this expose about how several people at the top got really substantial raises, like $20,000, which is news in itself. And the raises are effective January 1. Even though the raises are effective January 1, the papers weren't cut to effect the raises until 24 days later. Now, the way the government of Guam works, there are two important papers. There's a request for personnel action, that goes to the director of administration with copies all over the government, and a notification of personnel action. Employee gets copies of these things too, but the notification of personnel action is actually the pay document. One copy of it goes to the payroll division of the Department of Administration, and that's what causes the check employees' pay to be upgraded. But we have a statute that says you can't pay retroactive raises. And you recall back in the Calvo administration, retroactive pay raises were made. The Attorney General required that all of the raises be paid back after a kind of a crazy attempt to skirt the issue. And Liz Barrett Anderson, the Attorney General at that time, was going to prosecute. But she found her escape hatch. She said, well, you know, I've given an opinion that these pay raises were illegal, so it would be a conflict for me to prosecute now. So we're going to have to hire a special prosecutor. And the wheels were set in motion, and it was flubbed so bad that a special prosecutor was never hired, and nothing ever happened. So when on the 24th of January you attempt to raise somebody's salary effective January 1, could that be a retroactive salary increase? I don't know, but maybe, right? So you know, like the burn here is that Director of Administration got one, and a few other folks in the administration. But the thing that really jumped out and grabbed me was this: that 2 employees resigned on December 31st of last year. Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, and John Jr. Calvo, Chief of Staff. They resigned on December 31, and they were rehired on January 1st at the higher salary, of course, which is kind of bad. But here's worse, and this to me is corruption. Government employees, classified or unclassified, accrued annual leave. And the amount of annual leave you accrue depends on how long you've been with the government. If you've been with the government for 15 years, you accrue 28 days of annual leave every year. That's a lot of leave. If it's 5 or less, you accrue 13 days of annual leave. And that leave continues to accrue, but only up to a maximum of 320 hours. So once you've accrued 320 hours and you go another pay period and you don't take leave, you don't accrue more leave. You lose it. When an employee resigns or is fired, he is entitled to a lump sum leave settlement. He will receive a check in the amount of his lump sum leave minus taxes, etc. So by allowing Crystal and John Jr. Calvo to resign on the 31st and be rehired on the 1st, what you've done is giving them a nice Christmas bonus, in effect. You've allowed them to cash in the leave, which otherwise they wouldn't be able to. That, to me, is corruption. That's manipulating the system in a manner that does not benefit the people. It only benefits people that are close to you. I wouldn't see the governor doing that for folks out in the government that have not been favorable to her administration. I wouldn't see her doing it for anybody else.
So she would be aware of this corrupt action?
One would think so. If it's her chief of staff and Crystal Paco, you'd think those 2 people must be closer to her than anyone else.
Right.
Yeah. And if they aren't, if that was a surprise, then they should get another shot at cashing in their annual leave, because she should fire them, because this ought to be a huge embarrassment for her administration. But given the state of the, quote, fourth estate here, it probably won't be, because, oh, isn't that interesting? They quit on the 1st and rehire on the 31st. Oh, that's interesting.
I wonder if her voters know that some are more in than others.
I wonder. Yeah, the in group, all in with Josh and Lou. So that is very upsetting. It's just not the way a government is supposed to operate. And then, of course, giving the big pay raises to the top folks and screwing up so bad that the bottom folk, and even if she hadn't screwed up, they got theirs on January 1. The other guys had to wait until April 1st, and now it looks like it's going to be May 1st, given some of the, what Judy Won-Pat-10 said and what we've been seeing in the news here. So, that's one of the reasons that I'm not crazy about term limits. Because what happens when a governor is term limited, I saw this, and I'm not going to mention which governor it was, but, the governor during his first term did a pretty good job, but did some things that we thought, it's not what we like to see. Second term, okay, governor doesn't have to worry about re-election now. Now he can do all of those things that might be politically dangerous if he were running for re-election. He just did the things that he wanted to do the first term, but didn't want to get caught doing them. And that's the reason that I'm not in favor of term limits. Re-election is a particular kind of sword over an elected official's head, that he knows that if he screws up, he may not get reelected. And for a politician, that's the bottom. If you run for reelection and you're kicked out, especially after one term, that's the public saying we should have never voted for you in the first place. Okay, I'm going to go on something kind of along the same lines, the presidential search. And we've got 3 candidates for the presidential search. Let's head for Wrigley Field, and we'll see if we can find these folks at Wrigley Field.
This spring, shop on over to the Micronesia Mall and enter to win. Redeem receipts totaling $10 or more. Scratch for a chance at instant prizes from Burger King or Foot Locker. Or receive a grand prize entry form for our drawing on May 6th for a chance to win a new Toyota Tacoma 4x4 SR5 off-road package with lift kit from Atkins Scroll Toyota. 10 lucky runners-up will get $250 gift certificates from Goodwin Travel and Tour for tickets to Philippine Airlines. Shop more, win more at the Micronesia Mall. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more.
Yeah, so we've got 3 candidates. We've got Anita Borja Enriquez. We've got, let me get my paper straight out here. We have Mary A.Y. Okada, and we've got Legine Quisenberry. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm looking for as far as a president of our university. I'm a graduate of that university. I've been an adjunct professor at that university. My wife is a professor emerita from that university. So the university has been an important part of my life for almost 60 years. Now, this is what I'm looking for in the president of a university. I start out by asking this question. Do we want our university to be a teacher's college plus, a good local college that trains teachers and provides people for jobs that are available here on Guam? Or do we want our university to have national credibility? Do we want to prepare our students for a successful life on Guam? Or do we want to prepare our students for a successful life anywhere they want to go? Which one do you want? And then ask yourself the question, does the leadership at the university have a role in determining what kind of education our students are going to get? And I'm going to have to tell you right now, my bias is this, that you promote from within, but you stimulate from without. That the danger is taking someone who started out, the guy started out as a messenger for the bank and he worked his way up to be president of the bank, as opposed to somebody who came from a bank somewhere else, has had banking experience in several different banks, and comes in and takes over the bank. Which one of those do you think is going to bring more innovation, imagination, etc., with him into the mix? I'm going to get into this. I see somebody already wanting to chime in on it. Drive-through Jack with COFA questions. Drive-through, you're going to have to wait for a little while on COFA questions. So I suspect, and when we hired Thomas Kreis, and I have to confess error here, Thomas Kreis was one who I thought packed the necessary gear, had good academic credentials, had a higher education career. He had a Virgin Islands connection, so he knew a little bit about living on islands. But boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, his slacks were stained with grass.
They were.
On the knees.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so one of the things we want is we want someone who's president of the university who has some appreciation for the First Amendment and the concept of freedom of speech. And we don't want someone who's going to McNinch a professor just because the professor says something that, is rude, uncalled for, etc. Characterize what McNinch said in a light most unfavorable to McNinch. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't make a damn sight of difference. Freedom of speech is freedom of speech. And the way that you know that you have freedom of speech, you can test it by seeing who you can insult. And if you can't insult your governor, then you ain't got freedom of speech. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is the concept of academic inbreeding. I often thought that I would like to be president of Harvard. And I think I could have made a really good president of Harvard. You know how good I look in red, because I wear my red shirt every Monday, right? Maybe I should have gone to Seton Hall. Their colors, they're the orange men, right? Yeah.
Syracuse,
the orange men, yeah. Okay, so academic, if you wanted to be president of Harvard, the worst mistake you could do would be to get a degree from Harvard. That cancels you out right there because of the concept of academic inbreeding. The idea with universities, and the name kind of says it all. Universities, universal, not stuck in one cubbyhole, one pigeonhole. So if you wanted to be president of Harvard, then the best thing you could do would be to go to some other highfalutin school like Columbia or Yale or Princeton or something like that and get your degrees from someplace other than Harvard and get your academic experience from someplace other than Harvard. And then dust off your resume, and the next time the vacancy comes up, say, well, here I am. I've got good academic credentials. I got high grades at really top schools, and I've had good experience in higher education in other schools. I've been dean. I was a dean at Columbia. I was the vice president at Brown. That's how you get to be president of Harvard. Getting your bachelor's, master's, and a doctor of education at Harvard's not going to do it for you. Talk about degrees. If you're going to be a president of a university, you have to have a PhD. PhD, what do those letters stand for? Well, back in my university days, we knew what it stood for. When you're referring to Professor McClukenbach, PhD stood for piled higher and deeper. Where's that horn? Yeah. But what it really means, philosophy. Philosophy doesn't mean Plato and Socrates and Immanuel Kant and that kind of stuff. It means knowledge. Philo means knowledge. Sophy means love of. Philosophy, love of knowledge, right? So if you are a doctor of philosophy, that's what PhD stands for, love of knowledge. And PhDs come in several different disciplines. But in order to get a PhD is a research degree. And let me explain a little bit about research degrees. You know, lawyers and PhDs are referred to as doctor. You know, like Dr. McNinch and Dr. Underwood and Dr. Johnson. No, Dr. Johnson's a dentist. That doesn't count.
Dr. Jill.
Dr. Jill, yeah. So a doctor, PhD, is someone who has a research degree. Now, lawyers hold a degree of Doctor of Jurisprudence. But a Doctor of Jurisprudence is not a research degree. Law school is a trade school. You go to law school to learn how to do something that you can put to work and make a living doing. You can teach and you can do a lot of other stuff, but it's primarily a trade school. In order to get a PhD, you have to have a thesis for your dissertation. And you get into complicated concepts like your hypothesis and your null hypothesis. And just to develop that is an extremely arduous task. Part of getting a PhD is an endurance contest. They try to wear you out. It's a pretty select group, and they don't want just every Tom, Dick, and Harry getting into it. So once you've done that, then you get involved in forming up your dissertation question. And you have to have a real good handle on statistics to do this. Once you've got it, you go out and do your research, and then you write your dissertation. And you have to defend that dissertation between a group of other professors. So it's a really arduous task to get a PhD. Now, Underwood had an EDD, education doctorate. Not the same thing at all. People who have EDDs will often require that you refer to them as doctors, but compared to PhDs, they're really third string. It's a third string degree. PhD is the top of the heap, and there's nothing that comes close to it. And you won't find anybody who's a president of a university that has national credibility that's not a PhD. Now, there is one exception to that, and I granted this to Robert when he was president of the university. And the one exception is there are people who distinguish themselves in non-academic fields to the point that they are recognized as having the kind of leadership that could take a university to a good destination. The easiest example that I could point to would be Dwight David Eisenhower, who after he retired from the Army, perhaps one of the greatest generals to ever pin on 4 stars in the United States Army. So good he got to pin on a 5th one. But when Eisenhower retired, he went to work as president of Columbia University. Robert Underwood didn't check the boxes that I'm going to suggest for you, but he did spend 5 terms in the United States Congress. And, of course, that is something that would advance a person to the top of the heap. But the first thing I want to suggest is academic inbreeding is a no-no in the university. So, and I'm going to come back to that. Academic credentials. I just talked about academic credentials, how important it is to have the right kind of academic credentials. Having a master's degree from Wisconsin State at Whitewater, nice to have if you want to be a teacher, probably not going to get you a University of Guam. Master's degree from the university, same thing. And then higher education experience. I touched on that also. If all of your experience is in one university, not a career-enhancing move. Even if all of your experience were, say, at Harvard or Yale or Columbia or one of the highfalutin schools, better to have diversity. Hey, diversity of experience, but having all of your experience in a school here on Guam, that is not a ticket puncher. So you got to have those credentials. Okay, now let's examine the candidates in light of what I just laid out here for you. So I'm going to start out with Anita Enriquez. Anita Bora Enriquez, who has a Bachelor of Science in Management from the University of Maryland Global Campus. Now, I don't know what the Global Campus is, but I do know this. The University of Maryland historically has a contract with the Department of Defense to run classes on various military bases, including military bases here on the island. I wouldn't say that a Bachelor of Science in Management from University Global Campus is a prestigious degree. She has a Master of Business Administration, University of Guam. Same thing. She has an administration, her PhD, no, it's not even a PhD, and it doesn't list what the degree is. I'll come to it, I'm sure, later on, from Alliant International University. Me either, Jose. I haven't either.
Sounds like a correspondence school.
It does indeed. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's not Trump University, but yeah, they probably tried. She received a Doctor of Business Administration degree in International Business Administration from Alliant International University. A Doctor of Business Administration doesn't cut it. That might be the kind of degree that a person might front if he wanted to go to work in a business school. But it's not an academic degree. It will not get us any credibility as far as trying to have mainland credibility. And I know I see this guy, well, I don't care about the mainland. I live on Guam, and our university's here on Guam. We got to hire local people. Well, I kind of covered that at the beginning. You know, we got to hire. Kind of depends on what kind of students we want to turn out here. So,
Alliant, if I can just interject,
yeah.
Alliant International University, that's the name of it. out of California. It's a private for-profit university, and it's not very large. It has smaller campuses all over California.
Yeah. So there you go. Now, Anita, as far as I know, has spent her entire academic career at the university. And I'm not in a position to evaluate her tenure at the university. She is the senior vice president and provost at the university. So she's climbed through the ranks, and that's good. And that's exactly the kind of person that someone that comes in from the outside needs to have whispering in her ear, somebody who understands the local territory, right? And I guess one other thing, one other strike against Anita here is this. I'm going to tell a personal story here that kind of illustrates the point I want to make. When I was director of corrections, I had a gentleman named Ed Batanga as a deputy director of corrections. Ed Batanga was a Marine. He made sergeant major in 15 years. Unheard of. He retired as a warrant officer from the Marine Corps. He was a top-notch, he was the very, very best. And when I went from corrections to director of education, Ed took over as director of corrections. And we get together fairly frequently, and I'd tease him. And I'd say, Ed, you're a really good director of corrections, but you'll never be as good as I was because you'll never have Ed Batanga for a deputy. And that's kind of a strike against Anita, because if she becomes president, that means she's not going to be the senior vice president and provost anymore. So that's Anita. Then we have, I'm going to go to the second one, Mary Okada. And I'm going to start out, and I'm going to say some really nice things about Mary Okada. She has worked miracles at Guam Community College. Guam Community College kind of stumbled along over there. You old-timers would remember that at one time, we had a school called VOC-Tech, Guam Vocational Technical High School. The name of VOC-Tech was changed to Guam Trade and Tech, Trade School and High School. And then the VOC-Tech also added a higher education division, 2-year program from which you could receive an Associate of Arts degree or Associate of Science degree, right? And there was a community college as part of the University of Guam. About 1977 or so, the community college at the university, Trade and Tech High School, and part of the Department of Labor were all smashed together in what we now call the Guam Community College. And it had 2 or 3 presidents and a board and things like that, but it just seemed to be treading water up until now. So I'm going to take a short break here, and maybe I can finish this up before the top of the hour. I notice I've got Jesse in the green room who wants to talk about the 21st Century Healthcare Act. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to that before the end of the show or not. Jesse, you can hang on and see how it works.
Express yourself into the groove. The Guam Chamber of Commerce celebrates its 99th anniversary at the Dusatani Resort on May 6th with the theme of Madonna's Vogue. The Chamber's membership includes many corporations, large and small, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit organizations. Members play a key part in making Guam a star-bright place to live, work, and play. Let's congratulate the Guam Chamber of Commerce and its members on celebrating its 99th anniversary.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
So here we go. Churchill Downs, I'm heading down the home stretch here. 6 furlongs, I cross the finish line and wrap up another episode of Tall Tales. Back to Mary Okada. And if what I said about Anita Enriquez is true, it's true in spades for Mary Okada. Because if she became the president of the university, that would mean she'd have to leave GCC. And she has done a crackerjack job at GCC. But let's take a look at Mary Okada's credentials. Bachelor of Business Administration in Accounting and Management, University of Guam. She wants to be president of the University of Guam. Nix. Master of Public Administration, University of Guam. Strike 2. Director, as you were, Doctor of Philosophy? No. Doctor of Education Leadership, University of Phoenix. Yeah. Same thing. Same as Anita. Not distinguished academic credentials. Too much University of Guam. And her academic experience as far as I know, I don't know what she was doing before she was at the GCC. I don't know. But obviously, if I don't know, it kind of doesn't count, right? But University of Phoenix, that just doesn't cut it. And the inbreeding and the fact that she's doing an excellent job at GCC, I suppose one could try there. Well, we've seen what she can do. She's obviously good at getting grants, getting money, et cetera, putting together things. But, she also was there handing out the scholarship to the LGBT community member awardee who didn't want his name who didn't want their name mentioned. We've already had one woke president at the university. I don't think we need another woke president. So that's those two. Both suffer from the same shortcomings: academic inbreeding, lack of education, higher education experience, and not high-grade academic credentials. Okay, that leaves us with one more to look at, and that would be Legene Quisenberry, and her name is L-E, capital G-E-N-E, Legene. Strike 1, you got a funny name, Gene. In this era of and in this era of non-binary BS, we don't know if that's really her name, if that name has anything to do with a sex she was assigned at birth, or if it's a gnome to LGBT or what. But we'll just take it at face value. Now, she has a Juris Doctor from Gonzaga University School of Law. Doesn't have a PhD. Juris Doctor is not a research degree, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. Juris Doctor is not a research degree, and the reason that lawyers receive Juris Doctors is that historically, if you wanted to be a lawyer, you went to college and you studied what was called pre-law, and this was like 3 years of particular courses that ought to help you be a good lawyer. Pretty good dose of the social studies, a lot of English, a lot of writing, English composition, stuff like that. And if you got good enough grades in that first 3 years of pre-law, you could apply for admission to a law school. You pack up and go to law school for 3 years, and if you made it at the commencement, they'd hand you a piece of paper that said LLB on the top. Bachelor of Legal Letters. But lawyers, being the lobbyists they are, said, well, you know, what we ought to do, we ought to require a bachelor's degree for people to get into law school. This is what we call rent-seeking. We got to make it a little harder to get into law school, cut down the competition. But then after they accomplished that, then they said, well, you know, we got a bachelor's degree, we get a degree beyond the bachelor's degree, we should be called Juris Doctors. And it happened. Now, kind of the same thing happened to medical doctors. You know, medical doctors started the pre-law, 3 years of pre-law, you get admitted to medical school, graduate, you call yourself MD, Doctor of Medicine, right? But they they found out after they got out of medical school and started making big bucks and wanted to get into some business.